Hi, I am Julia, and here today I thought I was going to share some of my experience and tips I have learned during making handmade watercolors. I've been making handmade watercolors for about a year, a bit more, and I usually make about 10 to 15 batches every month. I also have an Etsy shop where I sell my paint. So today I thought I was going to share some of my experience with you if you are interested in starting making handmade paint or specifically watercolors. Making handmade paint and specifically watercolors is quite an investment in both time, energy and money. I mean, I love making handmade watercolors. I love making them, like physically making them. I also love the fact that I can come up with a lot of new colors mixing the different pigments I have. But it is an investment, and an investment in both like buying all the tools you need, but also continuing buying supplies as binder and pigments. Okay. So what do you need? What do you need to get started? What is it that is costing so much? Okay, first of all, you will need a glass molar. I started out with this one. It is pretty small, not very expensive, and gets the job done. Especially when I started, I was just going to do it for fun. I didn't know that it was going to turn into all of this. But quite quickly I realized this was very small, very hard and physically hard to hold and mold during a very long time that you do when you make paint. So after about a year I got this one. A lot easier to hold, both like a fall on grip, you can also hold it further down, and it's a lot bigger surface to work on. The next thing you will need is a slab. A slab is just another word for a piece of glass that you will use as your surface on your molar. What you need to consider is that you need a piece of glass that won't break, because that's not very fun. I have a piece of glass that is one of those very strong one with a plastic thingy in between, and it's quite big. Now you can, depending on what you're considering when you start making paint, if you're just going to do it for fun at home, testing it out, then by all means get a small one. But if you're considering going a bit larger, then you really should get a big one. You really want to have a big surface to work out the paint. Okay. Another thing that is invaluable to me are my palette knives. These are really cheap, but I use them all the time. I like to use these two. I like to have a long narrow one, so when I gather the paint I have a long surface, and I also have a little bit thicker one for grabbing a lot of stuff, like if I need honey or if I'm going to transfer paint, this one takes more. But they are not too big that they will be hard to work with, so definitely palette knives. I also have a spray bottle of water. It makes it a lot easier to dispense water onto the slab, having that sort of sprayer. Another thing that is definitely worth investing quite a lot of money in, and you will need to do that, is a breathing mask. Now here is the one that I have. It has one small filter in here you can change, and then you can change the whole thing here. Now, making that much paint that I do, like I said, 10 to about 15 batches each month, there's a lot of pigment flying about and I don't want to breathe that in. So I spent about 70 euros on this one. But on the other hand, I don't want to get sick doing this and never being able to make paint again. But even if you're just making paint in small scale or just for yourself, investing in something that will protect you breathing in, because you don't want to breathe in this kind of stuff. Now the pigments I use are not dangerous or harmful to breathe in, they're not toxic, but I still don't believe it's very smart to ingest or breathe in a lot of tiny particles into your lungs. So definitely a breathing mask. Another thing you need to protect yourself is an apron. I have my very pretty white apron. It's not very white anymore, but it means that I have saved many clothes. There is also some clothes I haven't saved. We don't need to talk about that. Also, if you have long hair, always keep a hair tie to hand so you can pull up your hair. You don't want to get hair into your paint. And then gloves. I know many paint makers use gloves. I know many who doesn't. It's very personal. I, for one, cannot stand using gloves. I hate using gloves. But when it comes to certain pigments, it's really good to use them, either if they're toxic or harmful in any way to the touch, but also some paints that I have are very staining. And for example, the other day, I was going in to have some dinner with my family and they were like, "Oh, the Smurfs are in town." Yes. And I was blue for a few days. We don't want that, okay? So that is like the tools, and these will serve you well. What you need that are dispensable, that you will keep rebuying, and there are quite a lot. Of course, the gloves. But we also have pigment, because you use the pigment. You need pigment to make paint. Now, there is so many different ways to buy pigment, so many different pigments at all, and I get questioned, I get asked a lot where I get my pigments. Now, some pigments I am happy to say I get them from this or this place, but some pigments, and I think it is especially the sparkly pigments, are from sellers that I am not very comfortable recommending because I don't feel that they are very good. Sometimes I get what I ordered, other times I don't. And I don't want to send you to them and you order stuff and you don't get it, or you get something else. So that is why. But I can wholeheartedly recommend Jackson. They have a lot of different pigments. They also have the binder that I will recommend. So yeah, okay. So you need pigment and you need binder. Now, pigment comes in many different shades and sizes. I mean, we have traditional flat pigment, we also have some fun sparkly one, and we have stuff in between. When it comes to binder, I would recommend starting out with the Schminka. It is called Ready to Use, and I think it's really good to start with this one because you don't need to consider all the different stuff you need to have in a binder. This is ready for you to use. Okay, and like I said, Jackson Art have these. Okay, what do you need more? Paint, binder, should be done right? Well, I like to use honey in my paint. That will make them easier to re-wet. Now, I like I said, make a lot of metallic or glittery pigments that are traditionally hard to re-wet. Hence, I add honey into them. It makes that they don't really harden and hold the water a lot better. Now, this is personal preference. Some think they don't like that they don't dry down. Some are very happy that you do, so you can keep on painting with them. I like it, I use it. You can also use oxgall in your paint if you want more flow. Now, I don't use oxgall in my paint and I don't have any oxgall, so I can't show you. Because I just use Swedish honey. But oxgall is something traditionally used in watercolors, and if you are interested in that, there are both natural and there's also some new synthetic oxgall on the market if you want a bit more flow. If you have some paint that you feel like, I like this paint but I want to have a bigger flow on the page, try to use some oxgall. Then of course what we also need, pans, lots of them. I'm running a bit low on my pans. Now, I would recommend putting your watercolor in whatever you like. It doesn't really matter. You can make watercolors and then put it on a platter or in a lid or in half pans or full pans. It doesn't really matter. Now, if you're planning on making this bigger batches to give to friends, sell, I would recommend putting them in half or full pans because they're standard size and will fit into pretty much all of these sort of little metal palettes, making it easier for others to build up a palette. Okay, but that is about all that we actually need. Now we can get started, right? Almost. We need to consider the space first. Now, I have my own art studio, Julia K ArtStudio. Yeah. Anyway, but I know not all have that, because this is just a fancy old stable. But what I'm trying to say is consider where you're going to make the paint, because if you're going to make it in a space like this that are meant for it, then you have considered that. But when we have pigment of different kinds, even if they're not harmful or toxic, it's still pigment that will be flying about. So consider that if you're going to make the pigment like on your dining room table or in your bedroom or whatever you're going to make it, consider that the pigment will fly about. Even if you don't pour it out and blow it all over, it will move. So just keep that in mind depending on where you are and what kind of pigments you're working with. Also consider the humidity. Now, I live in Sweden, we don't have that humid. This summer it was, and that reacted to my paint. Or my paint reacted to that, I should say. So just consider that, because sometimes, depending on where you live or humid or how dry your climate is, the paint will dry differently. That is just something to consider, so that if you make paint and you're like, oh, I want a lot of honey, and you live in a really humid place, and then you're like, why are my paint not drying? Well, that's the answer. You have both honey and you live in a really humid place. The paint will draw in the water. Okay? But now we can start. And my first thing to do when we start making paint is, of course, the mask. It's very important to keep the mask on while you have paint. I'm just kidding. Okay, but it is really, really important that you use the mask and making sure that it's securely on while you're making paint. As long as the paint can be like, if you can breathe on it and it will move, you need to keep your mask on. Once the paint is bound to the binder, or you can't like blow on it to blow it away, then you can remove the mask. But it's very important that you keep it on as long as the pigment can be flown about. So I start with this one. I add my pigment to my slab, I add my binder, I add honey, and then I use my palette knives to mix it into a goo. I don't really know the technical term for what I'm trying to explain, but I think you know. To get it all in a cohesive mess. Once that is done, I can remove my mask. This is also the point where I can abandon my little palette knife and start using my molar. But don't ever make the mistake of thinking that once you have like put it all together with the palette knife, that the paint is done. It is not. You really need to work it. Now, it depends on the pigment. Everything depends on the pigment. Some pigments will be very easy to work together, and it sort of like almost wants to be paint and be ready. But many pigments need to really be worked, and so you get a good watercolor. Now, watercolors are a bit different, or requires a bit more work than acrylic and oil paint, because watercolors are a transparent medium. Now, if you have pigments that are not worked out properly, or if it's not worked into a cohesive paint, you will see that right away. So that is very important. When we're going to start using the paint molder on the slab, I like to have my paint and then I like to spray the surrounding areas with water just to make it flow a bit easier in the beginning. Now, I can also use the water to control a bit of the consistency without adding more binder. I don't want to use too much binder. That will make the paint too hard, and it will also make it not as pigmented as I would like. I like my paint to be almost all pigment if I could. Now, depending on what pigment you have, that is depending on how long you will use it or how long you will mold the paint. Everything is depending on the pigment, but I would say anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour is where I go. So yeah, it is a bit time consuming, but I really want my paint to be the best that I can make them. Now, I am not a professional. This is not like a paint lab. I can't guarantee any form of quality checks because I just do this because I think it's fun, and I sell them because many people want to buy them. But I still want to make them as best that I can, and if I can't make the best that I can, then I will have to make it again, okay? So that is that. Now, something I think is very important to do during your paint making process is to keep a record. Now, you should document what pigments you use, like how much of each pigment, how much binder do you use, what does the different pigments come from, and all of that to ensure that you get the best quality and that you can be able to pick up where you left off. Now, I do a lot of paint. I need to be able to make the same paint again and again, so I need to keep that. So I have my recipe books where I write down all the paint. This is the second one. All the paints I make, how much I make, from what pigment, from what manufacturer the pigment is coming from, and how much that batch results in. Now, if you're just doing it for fun, you don't need to be quite so rigid about it, but I still think it's a really good idea to write down so you get an idea of how much pigment you use to get the different colors you make. Also very important to do while you're making your paint is keep swatching. Swatch just when you have like glued it all together. How does the paint look? How does it look when you have molded for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, for 30 minutes? That is also very good stuff to keep on when you're making the same paint again or making another paint to compare and contrast to. Now, once the paint is dry, you need to store it. And that is where our pans come into play. I like to use half pans and full pans because they're very easy, standard size, everybody can pretty much find a home for them. I like to fill them up about halfway, so they are somewhere along this line, hard to see. And when they have dried for about a month, I will come back, fill it again, let it dry, and then if it needs another pour, I will pour it again. If it's fine, then it will go into a second section of drying, because depending on the pigment, again, these paints need to dry for about 2 to 3 months. Okay, so yeah, when all of that is dry, you need to clean. You need to clean everything, because pigment, super tiny particles, can destroy a whole batch of paint if you haven't cleaned your slab or your molar or your palette knife properly. And it will also keep, because if you don't, they will rust. So take care of your supplies. But clean and clean and clean. But I use a lot of wet wipes because I don't have a place to clean with running water here. But it also makes sure that I continuously see on the wipes if there's any pigment left, because it can't be any pigment left. I can't one day make a fluorescent pink color, coming back the next day making a white color that is turning pink. That is not okay, okay? So make sure you clean everything. And the quicker you clean them, the better, because the paint won't have time to set. Now, we are making watercolors. They are water soluble. There won't be a problem, like you can clean it out later. But a quick tip, just clean it right away. Also, make sure you clean yourself. This might sound very... I don't actually know how it sounds, but I have learned, make sure you clean yourself. Like, especially your hands, make sure that you clean, especially if you have any cuts on your hands that you can get pigment in, but especially your face. I make sure that I clean my face properly, because I don't always do that. I'm sorry, it's true. But if I'm making paint, I always make sure that I scrub my face or exfoliate, or whatever it's called, so I get all of that dirt and grime off my face. And I know, because I always get some zits and pimples during the weeks that I'm making more paint than the weeks that I don't. So just take care of yourself. I think that is about it. We have now made paint, and soon, about a month, you will be making that paint again to refill your first one. Or you can put them into a jar. I like to put them into a jar if there is if I made a very large batch, or if I have made a batch of paint that is a bit more complicated, that has more pigments in it, I like to put that into a jar, making it very easy just to re-pour. That is my tips. That is what I have learned from about a year of making handmade watercolor paints. I hope this has helped you if you're interested in starting out. And yeah, I mean, it is really fun. Even if you just do it on a very small scale, just for yourself or for your friends, I can highly recommend it because it is really fun. Now, is it expensive? Yes. Is it a bit harmful? Yes. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope you liked this video. Now, come back on Saturdays because I have studio vlogs if you want to see what's going on in the studio. Also check on the Etsy shop. First of every month we have a shop update where there's new colors in the store, or just check out right now because we have quite a lot of fun stuff there. So yeah, thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon.